this is Chuck from Monocoque Metalworks. Check out my new shirt. My daughter made this up. I think my kids were sick of seeing me wander around in rags all the time. You know, I have all these t-shirts and they're full of holes from welding. My daughter made this up on the internet. No, you can't have one. It's just for me. Although I did make some up for Brent too, but he didn't seem too excited about walking around looking like the Bobbsey twins. So we'll see how that works out. But anyway, this is Chuck from Monocoque Metalworks. Today we're going to talk about mating the old original portion of this 67 Coupe to the new floor that we've constructed in our jig. And we've done this many times before, so some of this might be repetitive, but it's supposed to rain all weekend. I think I'm going to come in and just kind of rally like old school back in the day before Brent's time and try to get a lot of this done this weekend. So this will be the first part of the video, and then I'll come along and add pieces in. We'll post the final version with everything, start to finish, on our YouTube channel. Go check out our new YouTube channel. It's called Monocoque Metalworks. There's tons of videos. They're totally free. There's no ads. I'll tell you how to do these cars start to finish as far as the metal goes. So come on in closer and you'll see that we've got our original portion, which is the upper half. It's all been sandblasted, restored. All of the flanges have been doctored up. You can see where we've put red oxide all inside the bulkhead. We didn't have to do too much repair to this upper section before we were ready to mate it to the new floor. This is a 67. It was actually a 1 1/4, which is all Series 1 with the open headlights. It will have closed headlights by the time we're done. But then we built a new floor assembly in the jig, and so what we have to do now is mate the two. We can't always do it the exact same way that the factory did it because we're not doing it in the same order. So we can't get the spot welders in there. We're going to have to use a lot of MIG and plug welding to get the job done, although they use some MIG welding too, and we'll show you that. So what we'll do next is you can see it's all centered up on the transmission tunnel. You've got a little lip sticking out in there. I don't know if you can see that, but that's okay. And that's kind of how the cars are originally. They don't have a perfect edge there. We will come along and pull this in with a series of large C-clamps, and whatever we can do. We will yank this right down into this corner, and then we will MIG along here and along here. You can kind of see down in there where we've ground down the MIG weld that they had. So we'll come along there. I usually do a MIG along in here as well. I'll stop here because I don't want to create interference when the frame rail comes down in there. Same thing along here. We'll pull this corner up and we'll MIG along here. Now you might notice right here there's this corner sticking out. When you get the floors, they are the same on both sides. That's actually not correct for anything other than a flat floor. On the flat floor, the two bell housing sides were exactly the same. They had this exact same curve here. They very quickly figured out they were running out of room for the clutch slave fork to move. So they put this little panel in that we call the wedge, which cuts off that much of that corner. And so you will have to trim the floor down, and then I usually run a MIG weld along there. You can see the factory brazed this. So we'll just grind that brazing off and then put a MIG weld in there. Up here, we'll put in a new X panel, toe panel, whatever you want to call it, and I'll spot weld that in after the jigs are off. Why don't you guys go that way, I'll go this way, and we'll talk about what's going to happen on the inside. Sorry about the echo. Inside, you can see we will be spot welding the A post to the new inner sill. We'll also do that with the B post. Here, the factory ran a MIG weld right along there, and see, there you go. This isn't pushed up in there, and this will all get squeezed up in there tight. So this will all be spot welded, and then we'll run a MIG along there. I actually do usually run some beads of MIG along here just to strengthen it, because it all gets covered up with carpet anyway. Same thing here, it'll be spot welded all along here. I'll put a couple extra beads in. I usually run a MIG weld all along here like that. There's a million spot welds in here from the factory. That's always difficult to take apart. This hole here is because we've cut out this portion of this rear part of the bulkhead. That will get repaired with what we call the rear sill closing panel. The rear sill closing panel is really a repair piece for the end of this, which is all one piece. That'll get done after the sills go on in the rotisserie. Now you can see we've got the subframe tubing in here. This is 1/8" steel tubing. It's welded straight to the floor, and this will be covered up and hidden. We call it the hidden subframe with the factory cross member piece, which is typically 20 gauge. We make it out of 18. So we've doubled the strength of the original piece, but then we've hidden this roll bar strength tubing inside of it. We will get another piece of this tubing back here. Because this car didn't need a new tunnel, these pieces will stop at the tunnel on both sides. If we were building up this car from scratch with more of a floor and we had to do a whole new tunnel, then we would run this bar straight all the way across through the drive shaft tunnel, because the drive shaft doesn't go up and down because it's an independent rear, and it's 2.5 inches high, and our tubing here is only 1 inch high. Now here, you'll see there's a gap that's more the tunnel and less the floor, because the floor has big runners going along it, and then we've got this piece in here too. So the floor is probably sagging a little bit, but it's mostly flat. The tunnel, with all the work that's been done to this, has probably been out of shape a little. We will plug weld this. We'll drill holes here. I'll screw it down tight, and then I'll come along and plug weld it with the MIG welder. Same thing here. We'll plug weld along there, and then you can see up in here, look, I'm reaching through a little hole. The factory actually used a very early style of MIG welding here and up there. And they ran into the same problems we're running into. You get to a certain point where you can't reach with the spot welder, and you've got to do some MIG welding. Now, when we put the factory cross member piece on here, it's that kind of like a cap in our case. See how we've ground this down flush? This is a double layer inside of here for the gearbox mount. And there's a factory MIG weld there. We've ground that down flush. That'll be a good base for us to just butt up against it with our piece of 18 gauge and run a MIG weld around there. And then in the back, we will put what I call the seat dish. We'll put that in last after we've already welded another piece of that tubing in there. And you can see we've got to do a little repair there in front of the chassis leg. That's very common. And so we'll weld that up. We'll put the tubing in, and then we'll put the seat dish piece in. That seat dish will also have to be drilled out and plug welded, because now we're going into a blind area. And all of this will be sealed up with good quality primers, paints, that type of thing as we put it together. You can see there's a lot of weld throughs sprayed all over the place for the surfaces that have mated. If you want to take a quick look at what it's going to look like, turn around there. This car behind you is done. This one is a Roadster. There's a little more access. You can see we were able to spot weld along the tunnel when we put that in. But then up here, you'll see just what I was talking about. You've got your plug welds along there. And then up here, we get into a MIG weld that goes along the edge. See, this one is a 61, so it doesn't have that little panel. And then back here, we've butt welded the 18 gauge cross member piece to the tunnel there, right like we were talking about. And this also has that tube under it. So that's it for the opening salvo on what's going to go on here. And then throughout the weekend, I'll be here by myself, and I'll take some videos as I go to show you how it goes. And you know, if I put in a lot of hours this weekend, I should be able to connect these two. Then this can come out of the jig, go back into the rotisserie, where we will put the sills on and do some finish work from the underside and be able to flip it around more. So thanks for watching. Come back early next week to see what we got done, and go to that YouTube channel in a couple days and you'll be able to see the whole thing.